Hey, Dr. Gould. This is our sheep brain dissection project. As you already know, I'm Eddie Reese.
And I'm Billy Pappas over FaceTime because we had a snow day today.
Yeah, so let's get started. I'd also like to add on that it is Billy's birthday. And yeah. Alright, so here we have the brain divided into sections, specifically the lobes, and I'll start with the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe controls higher mental functions such as decision making, problem solving, and planning. This includes behavior, abstract thought processes, attention, creative thought, emotions, intellect, reflection, judgment, initiative, inhibition, sense of smell, muscle movements, skilled movements, some motor skills, physical reaction, overriding and suppressing unacceptable social decisions, recognizing similarities and differences of things, and sexual urges.
Next, we have the occipital lobe, which controls visual and reading functions. It helps us to identify color and interpret how each color has its different shades. It aids in understanding and distinguishing between different shapes and sizes. It is located behind the parental lobe.
Yep, and then we have the parietal lobe in blue, and it has somatic sensory cortex to help feel pain. It's the reception site and the processing center of sensory information and comprehension. It comprehends some languages and reading functions and some visual functions.
Right, and then in red, we have the temporal lobe, which controls auditory functions, memory, emotion, smell, music, fear, a sense of identity, and also language. Then the main powerhouse is the cerebellum, which provides time-informed muscle activity and provides a sense of balance. It initiates corrective impulses and works with the brainstem. The cerebellum provides feedback and controls for motor output and the sense of proprioception, which gives us an intuitive map of our bodies.
On this slide, we have the brain, but instead of separating into sections, we just explain some of the big things on this part of the brain. So we have on the gyri, we have it's the surface of the cerebrum, and it's basically covered with large folds of tissue, and this is what the gyri are. And then you have the sulci, which are just shallow grooves that separate the gyri from one another.
Then down the middle is the longitudinal fissure, which just separates the left and the right side of the brain.
Okay, so on this slide we have the olfactory bulb, and it's not easily seen on our brain, but it's like a little missing, but it is there. It's comparatively larger than the sheep's brain, or it's comparatively larger in the sheep's brain when compared to human brain, because animals obviously need to rely more on their senses and ability of smell. Naturally, humans rely more on hearing and seeing, and human brains allow us to be able to think and be self-aware, and sheep's brains do not have these capabilities. So what it basically does is when air is inhaled through the nose, it passes over the olfactory membranes, where chemicals that are in the air stimulate the numerous olfactory receptor cells, and this information passes from the receptor cell neurons to the bulbs, and it goes from the bulbs to your actual brain so you can process that information.
All right, so this is the underside of our sheep brain. And starting up top with the optic nerve, it is a paired nerve that carries neural impulses from the retina or the eye to the actual brain. Then to the right, we have the optic chiasma. It's just part of the brain where the optic nerves they cross with each other. Then we have the optic tract, and the optic tract is actually two different tracts. The left one and the right one are completely separate. The left optic tract transfers information from temporal retinal fibers from the left eye and nasal retinal fibers from the right eye. The right optic tract does the opposite, so it takes the retinal fibers from the right eye, and then it goes to the nasal retinal fibers from the left eye. And then to sum it up, these are each considered cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are the nerves that emerge directly from the brain, including the brainstem. Cranial nerves relay information between the brain and parts of the body, primarily to aid from regions of the head and neck.
Yep, and then over here we have the pituitary gland, and it is basically the master endocrine gland in the sheep. Hormones are secreted by the pituitary gland, and they stimulate and control the functioning of almost all other endocrine glands in its body. And pituitary hormones also promote growth and control balances in the body. And then over here we have the pons, and it works with the cerebellum in coordinating voluntary movement.
Right, so here we have the inside of the brain, which we took pictures of after we cut it open. And from here you can see more portions and different functions. We're going to start with the hypothalamus, which is a neural structure lying below the thalamus. It directs eating, drinking, and regulates your body temperature. It helps to govern the endocrine system via the pituitary glands and is linked to emotion. After that, we have the medulla, which is at the base of the brainstem, which helps you to control your heartbeat and breathing.
Yep. And then after we have the corpus callosum, which is right here, and it is a large band of neurofibers connecting the two brain hemispheres, and it carries messages between them. Then we have the hippocampus, which you could better see with a coronal section cut. The hippocampus itself is highly involved with our memories, and without the hippocampus, you would not be able to remember anything that you were hearing, reading, or just anything at all.
And now after that, we have the thalamus, which is also referred to as the brain sensory switchboard. It's located at the very top of the brainstem. It directs messages to the sensory receiving areas in the cortex and also transmits replies to the cerebellum and medulla. After that, we can find the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for detecting fear and preparing for emergency events. It has a major role in our perception of fear and other emotions. It also is known for being the reason for the fight or flight response.
Yep, and then we have the pineal gland over here, which is, there's also a picture too on the next slide, and the pineal gland basically synthesizes and secretes melatonin, and it's a pretty simple hormone, but it communicates information to various parts of the bodies. Ultimately, melatonin has the ability to entrain biological rhythms, and it also has important effects on the reproductive function of us and sheep. Okay, so on this slide, we have the superior and inferior colliculus. So the superior colliculus, which is right here, anchors the cerebrum to the brainstem, and it's a visual reflex center, which coordinates head and eye movement when tracking a moving object.
And after that, we have the inferior colliculus. It also anchors the cerebrum to the brainstem. It's the auditory reflex centers, which are a part of the auditory relay from the hearing receptors to the sensory cortex.
And then also we have, you can't really see it here, but right here is where the pineal gland would be, and we explained that in the last slide. Okay, so on this slide we have the difference between white and gray matter, and you can't really tell, but the gray matter is just whatever is darker, and the white matter is just right along there. Alright, so Billy's going to start with gray matter.
Alright, so gray matter gets its color from the cell bodies within, or the somata of neurons, while the white matter gets its color from the myelinated axons. Myelin is a fatty white substance that surrounds the axon of some nerve cells, forming an electrically insulating layer. They carry electrical impulses from one neuron to the next one.
Yep. Alright, so now we're at the end of our presentation. I hope you liked it, Dr. Gould. In this right here, we kind of try to get a microscopic picture of like the difference between white and gray matter, but I guess this sample we took had more gray matter than white. So along the edges right here, you can actually see the white matter, and then near the middle right here is the gray matter. It kind of like ripped off as we were putting it on, but this is like the best picture we had, so. Yep. Billy, would you like to say anything?
I had a great time working on this, and I hope you get better.
Yep. Get well soon.
That's
Bye, Dr. Gould.